what we're going to do is actually show you this idea of ARC's process of convening and forming and building. And so we've been working with IDEO since May. We had a dinner, an ARC dinner in May about AI and health, and we at that launched a process that involved an IDEO team, an ARC IDEO team, really trying to take what was learned at that gathering and make some sense of it, come up with some insights, recommendations. So we're going to give you a kind of lightning quick tour of this report we're calling a Framework of the Future for AI and Health that ARC and IDEO have been working on. And this is Bruce McGregor, as I said, and I work with an IDEO, and he's been very instrumental in getting this kind of experiment off the ground. So before that, I'm going to give you we put a few answers in our questions in the survey about AI and health, and I'll just put one up here, which is, would you mind having an AI-equipped robot or device replace your primary care physician? Wow. And it was pretty dead even on this. But how about, anybody want to say yes to that? Maybe you don't want to do it in front of your friends. Anyway, so interesting. So this is clearly a discussion that is going to be going on for a while, what exactly we want out of these machines when it really comes down to things personal. So going to go through this framework for the future, some of the processes and ideas and amazing comments that have come out of this process. And I'm going to tee it up a little bit with the talk about the dinner we had in May, some of the different basic ideas that came out of that. Bruce is going to tell you then about how we synthesized some of those ideas and how we came up in the end with some opportunities and recommendations for entrepreneurs, for others in this space. And so we do have a unique opportunity, I think, right now. We're at the very beginning of a technology that's been around in other industries and arguably has been around in healthcare too for a period of time, but it hasn't really become a major force in basically the largest enterprise, other than I think the US government in terms of monetary size on the planet. So we have this real opportunity to design it the way we want. And we get all these scary scenarios, but I think it only becomes scary if we sort of blow it, especially at this stage. So what are the possibilities for entrepreneurs, for investors, for others in this space? And we talked to literally dozens and dozens of all the players on the IT side, on the biomedical side, and others. And just to give you a few statistics, you could go on with this, but AI clearly is arriving. It's fairly slow. It's interesting. Although it's a lot of buzz, it's still only 15% of the investment last year of all of AI. So it's 15% of all investment in AI went to health. So it's still coming along, but it's certainly growing, and will continue to, as our last panel talked about, as being really a major part of neuroscience as well as pretty much everything else in healthcare. So this is this ARC IDEO process, and we're again experimenting with this. The idea is to come up with themes, with convene people, we synthesize, we build that out, and hopefully come up with some useful information on this. Our theme, AI and health. Our convening, as I said, was a dinner in May. This is Paul Saffo. We split up. The way these dinners work is everybody comes, those of you that haven't been there, we have a reception, we then have a formal program, a lot of talks and panels, and then we split everybody up into small tables where everybody talks. So next time you come to one of these, you're going to have to talk yourself. But everybody stands up and answers a table talk question. And our question that night was, what are your greatest hopes and fears about AI and AI in the future? And these are some of the scenes from the dinner. Again, we hope to get you guys there, but these are amazing how they play out. They're called Jeffersonian dinners. You've probably been to them. But in our case, we get about 70 or 80 people, and these are all kind of handpicked from different aspects of life. And you have these conversations which you then capture. And one of the places we capture them is the ARC Fusion website. And as I said earlier, we're developing a magazine called ARC Fusion Magazine on these different topics. But right now you can go up on arcfusion.org and see all the videos from that dinner. We have people like Ray Kurzweil and Paul Saffo, Lori Fiber from IBM, Watson, and on and on. We also always have dance and music. There's an amazing dance troupe called Sensory. And these dancers wear sensors on these skin-tight outfits, and as they dance and their skin temperature goes up and their pulse rises, they start glowing in lots of different colors. So pretty cool. Check out that video. We then took all this back, a massive information and commentary and insights, into a series of workshops at IDEO. So trying to turn the words into action. And these are some of the notes from the dinner, some of the quotes, and basically, this is a synthesis of what we learned, and I'm going to hand this over to Bruce.
Thank you. So part of the synthesis is to pull all this together into some way. So we looked at these ideas about how can we radically improve health came out of it. A lot of it came out about how do we stay human and or make ourselves better, some of which we just heard in the last talk. So that was very interesting. Kind of the big takeaway out of this was that nothing is inherently good or evil. It's really the choice is up to us and what we want to do with that. So there was no real concerns about the technology that was going to go and it was going to be able to do things that it was going to do. The concerns were what we as the human beings would do with that technology. So it was much more of a kind of look in at ourselves in terms of what we were thinking about. So we took all this, we came out with these main areas of concerns. And so you can see the list here, but an example of that was the top one, the philosophy and practicality. And so kind of looking at that and sort of this idea that people were interested in the practicality of what an AI could do, but almost more interested in the philosophy behind how we would apply it and what we would do with it. And so that created a set of hopes that, the kind of things that you'd see here. The sort of creators are the key people. Who are the people that are funding it? How is society evolving and managing it? And there are these big opportunities for what we're doing with that. And then the fears are kind of more what you'd expect. The robots are going to come and kill us all. But also other interesting things like we will regulate this so heavily we'll prevent, our fears will force us to regulate to the point where we can't be innovative and really get the benefits from it. So this kind of led to this kind of end, and we use this phrase, how might we, as a way of kind of optimistically looking towards the future and seeing what's possible. So we said, how might we create a framework and or a set of philosophical principles for how AI can and should be applied alongside practical considerations. So that was one element. The other one was tensions, which is something that we see a lot in the design space. Kind of how do you hold two ideas in the same place at the same time? And so we think earlier, sort of in talking about the question around genetics or the microbiome even, right? There's these questions, sort of nature versus nurture, right? It's not one or the other. It has to be this combination of both. And that was very much what we saw here. Like how do we hold these things and bring them together? So again, you kind of see there's a list of different things, some from kind of obvious things like safety, but as an example, this idea of well care versus sick care is one of these interesting tensions. So I think someone mentioned earlier that essentially we're set up as a medical system today to deal with sick care, and yet most of what's been talked about today is how can we take advantage of well care and what are the opportunities that has, both for us in our quality of lives and for the total cost that we're spending on in healthcare. So then we started to try to get into the prototyping space, and so we sort of looked at a journey and created a very simplified journey of what would happen within somebody's visit to a hospital and played it through in different scenarios. So in an acute care scenario, in a chronic care condition, and in the kind of catastrophic life-threatening kind of, I have cancer moment. And so looking at there are discrete steps that happen along the way, and kind of underlying it all is this sort of learning and research that's driving things forward. So then taking those journeys, then we also stepped back and said, let's just not try to think about everything that AI could do, but if we took a look at 4 silos, how could they affect us? So this idea of lifestyle and behavior, and of how could it help us in the medical profession kind of reach out into people's lives. In safety and learning, how can we use it to kind of advance what we're doing, but also very specifically kind of learn what are we doing now and how can we do that better. The provider interactions, so all the tricks about how you kind of work through getting into your hospital, being diagnosed, all these sort of moments of interactions that we have right now. And even to the point that a doctor spends 7 minutes with a patient and then 25 minutes filling out the paperwork. Are there opportunities to change that and change that around? And then logistics and records, the whole pattern recognition space. This is, we can spend a lot of human time doing things that actually a machine is really good at. And that can free up time for us to do the things that humans are really good at. So we took those and said, the potential for AI is to take these four areas that are often quite separate in today's world and sort of try to bring them together. Not that the AI is the central hub for everything, but the functioning of the AI allows us to, as an individual, to kind of capture this ecosystem of knowledge. And then we mashed it all together, which is kind of the ultimate form of synthesis. And we kind of looked across, thought how hopes and fears come in, how the four silos came in, the journeys, we put it all together, and we applied the human filter to it. So we didn't have an AI that could do this, so we just used our own brains and came out with these ideas for opportunities and recommendations. And pass that back to David to take you through those.
So that's partly a human-centered design solution, which IDEO is famous for. When you're thinking about these companies, a lot of people still have siloed thinking about this. You want to solve this one little problem over here. But in a way, it all fits into a giant ecosystem. And since we're at the very early days on this, again, we need to think kind of big, but also broad about how we're going to design this. So that chart there is something I think anybody who's in any of these spaces, any of these places, whatever you're designing, as a small app or a giant system in a hospital, we need to start thinking about this with a certain awareness of how it all kicks together. And the learning and research down below here is fascinating too, because this is what's really missing in all of healthcare right now. It's almost non-existent, where it's like the subconscious of our brains. Everything that happens up here, it should feed into places, and you're having a constant, this is what machine learning is, a constant reevaluation of that. So kind of a fun chart. We're trying to at least visualize what this might look like. And then finally, we're still working on this part of the project, and this will be a huge paper actually, with a lot of details, and we're going over some of the major points here, and it's a little up high level, but we've done a lot of work on each of these areas we've been talking about. But here we come to the build part. So the opportunities and recommendations. And we have a grouping under general guidelines when you're designing your company or your policy or whatever. And it's pretty basic, but working with IDEO, it's interesting to see how less often than you would think companies actually talk to the people they're actually designing the product for, and especially in the biomedical industry. So talk to people, you build safeguards that push the hopes, like that arrow going up instead of down. And by the way, some of this does sound a little high-minded, but this is what a group of IT people and biomedical people, really hardcore people, these are leaders from industry groups. We had people from Google, we had people from UCSF, Stanford. This is what they said. They might have said, hey, we want to really talk about how to program this or that, and this would be a very different presentation. But this is what they were thinking about, which is what's so interesting here. Integrating learning and feedback, creating these clear objectives for influencing lifestyle change. We all talk about that, behavior change. What does that really mean, and how can AI help? And then there's this category of why healthcare is different, and this is something, as a guy who's written about this for years and years, so many companies that call me and want me to do a story, they have not thought about, say, regulation. I was on a panel at a neurogaming meeting, or a neuroscience meeting the other day, and we had a panel of companies coming up with different devices to help people think more clearly in sports. And there were several devices they were thinking about, like transcranial electric stimulation. You put a little, you're about to go out and play football or baseball. The FDA may be interested in that, and none of them had really thought about that. So, we have to use AI effectively, and that learning feedback loop is going to be, imagine the FDA where there's a constant learning process, and it's constantly updating everything. And, this rigidness goes away. So that's the vision there. But we need to build that. Somebody needs to build that. And adapting existing AI from other industries. This is the fun part, because we're doing dry runs like in Facebook, with the facial recognition software and other ID softwares in there. We're doing this with Google searches. We're doing this, which IBM Watson is working on, this sort of massive, giant Google search. Self-driving cars, that kind of autonomous technologies. To me, we just are practicing for healthcare. But you entrepreneurs out there, let's start thinking about how to move this in, very effectively. So the report will be launched soon. Hope to actually be done for this, but we're getting there, and we're very excited. These are the people that were involved, both the ARC team and the IDEA team. It's been quite an effort with a lot of really, really smart people. And just close with my friend Andrew Keen said, when you pull back the curtain, artificial intelligence is us. So we need to keep that in mind. So thank you guys for all your work.
Good.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Yep.